Hi, Andrew from Sachs, and welcome to video number 5 in our 8 video sequence on resilience and engagement and how to lead for resilience and engagement. So far we've talked to you about the nature of resilience, we've talked to you about nature and nurture and how they can affect how resilient somebody is, and also we've talked about what it matters and why it's important to try to create a highly resilient workforce. In this video, we'll be showing you some population findings on resilience, which can help you to understand where resilience varies from group to group in the population, but also some of the reasons about why resilience might be higher in certain groups than others. Some interesting data here. These are statistically significant differences. And what we'll see is that resilience varies from industry group to a certain extent. And we see property and business services is the most resilient group. Cultural and recreation services is also high. Financial and insurance is also high. Transport and storage, communication, they're the high groups in a sense of resilience in the population. The lowest group is in fact construction, which is interesting. Electricity, gas and waste and water services is also low. What's going on there? It could be argued that the groups that have the highest levels of resilience are in fact in the industry sectors which are most people orientated. Perhaps the people contact component attract people who are naturally more resilient because people who are attracted to those industry sectors know that they are like that they're going to have interpersonal demands. Something else that might be going on is that because the people-orientated industry sectors tend to attract extroverts, it may well be that that's one of the things that's happening in terms of higher resilience. Because as we showed you in an earlier video, extroverts tend to be a bit more resilient than introverts. But in any event, there are statistically significant differences across these groups. How about income? What you can see here is that from $0 to $150,000, the levels of resilience are in fact very similar. There is no statistically significant difference there at all. However, once you get above $150,000, you'll notice that the levels of resilience jump significantly. Is that really what high salaries are about? If you think of how people get to these more senior positions, well, perhaps there's a fair bit of stress on the way up. And so maybe people who are not so resilient either don't pursue those more senior positions or perhaps get weeded out because they can't cope with the stress. But in any event, this is a clear finding that people who are at the higher levels of salary tend to be more resilient than people who are at the lower levels of salary. How about age? You'll notice that there's an upward trend as people age. This is not statistically significant. The differences are not big enough to say that there is statistical significance in these results. But we certainly do know that resilience is declining in young people in the Western world. Generation after generation of young people seem to be a little less resilient than the group that came before them. Now, this has been demonstrated in a range of different databases across the world, and it really raises the question, why? And it seems that the explanation that most people believe is twofold. One is that the style of parenting that's used often in the West these days is an extremely supportive style of parenting, and being supportive to people is kind, but it doesn't make them more resilient. In other words, the way that you make people more resilient is by getting them to prove to themselves that they can cope with whatever challenges they're facing. So more supportive parenting as opposed to, okay, you've got this problem, come to me if you need to, but try to solve it yourself. That kind of parenting can cause people to be less resilient. The second component, or the second theory, is really that it's screens. Many people these days live their lives consumed by things like social media. And one of the things that we do know is that that's a kind of like an anti-mindfulness technique. We will talk about mindfulness more later on in this video sequence. But mindfulness is all about being present in the here and now. And we know that if people do that, they become more resilient. Whereas if you're living your life through fantasies like digital experiences, videos, games, those kinds of things, that actually makes you less able to cope with the world. But in any event, there's this longitudinal decline of resilience in young people. Now that's a practical concern because there are some jobs that used to be done by 20-year-olds that now cannot be done to the same level of confidence by those 20-year-olds. So many organisations have had to put more experienced people into jobs that previously, let's say 20-year-olds were able to do. So it's a really practical consideration about how the world has changed and how that affects people's workforce planning activities in their own companies. Now, this really raises a question about whether resilience can be assessed, and in fact it's quite easy to assess from a recruitment point of view. This is a result from our resilience assessment, and what you'll see is that this person who has been assessed is high in resilience, so their score is 62, which is well above population average. So this person can be assumed to be a resilient person. So that's something that can be applied at a population level, and at an individual level, if each individual you hire is more resilient than the last, then of course that gradually causes the levels of resilience in your organisation to increase as well. So the next video in the sequence will be about resilience and engagement. Resilience is an individual characteristic. Engagement is a group characteristic. And what we'll be doing in the next video is to show you the link between the two, and then subsequently we'll be giving you some techniques to increase both resilience and engagement. Join us for the next video to find out more about the link between resilience and engagement.